Hi, everyone, and happy holidays. This is Andrew from the Agile Uprising, and today we're revisiting the 12 days of Agile. And today we're going to talk about Principle 10. So, this is a reintroduction to this discussion between myself, James Gifford, and Troy Lightfoot. The Agile Principle 10, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, is essential. What a great topic. It was a great discussion with my colleagues. We talked about prioritization, refinement, different methods of prioritization, and really got into some pretty specifics around some of the techniques that we've used in the past that have warranted some interesting outcomes. So I really enjoyed talking with James and Troy about various different methods and approaches. I even learned a new term, YAGNI. I hadn't heard that before. It's an acronym for you aren't going to need it. So I've included that in my vernacular when coaching teams or organizations. So I really enjoyed the discussion. Hopefully you'll all listen to it again or for the first time and enjoy it as much as I did discussing it. We'd love to hear your input, your feedback, and continue the ideas coming. This has been a great platform to really ignite some really interesting discussions and topics of conversation. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday through the season and look forward to the next year and what greatness we can all bring when it comes to the Agile universe and change. Happy holidays and enjoy the listen.
This is Joshua Karievsky. You are listening to the Agile Uprising podcast.
Welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. And we're rocking our way through the 12 days of Agile. And tonight you're joining us for good old number 10. And if you're singing along with the carol, you're talking about 10 Lords of Leaping. And for us, we're talking about simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. So tonight I have with me Andrew Leff, and we also have Troy. So tonight, guys, how many times have we been in a as coaches and even as Scrum Master or product people? How many times have we found ourselves sitting in one of those planning meetings and they're like, "Well, we've got $1 million to do whatever this initiative is," and you're just sitting there, and Santeria is just starting to play in your head, and you're like, "Oh, these guys are going to spend that $1 million, and they're going to spend about $1 million more." So, when are we going to learn when to say no? I mean, the value of this principle is about simplicity. So, what in your experience have you done to help people understand how to maximize simplicity in your agile careers? I mean, we can get into take it down the rabbit hole of story mapping, business cases, outcome templates, whatever direction we want to go with this. I'm sure we all have a arsenal of tools in our tool belt that we've used to help people realize what the simplest thing is, so they can actually maximize their value.
Maybe we can start with story mapping. I've done it a bunch of times, and I'm sure you guys have too. Anything you want to call out as far as story mapping and how you feel like it pertains to this principle? How you feel like it is ties back and really is applicable for this principle?
So for me, story mapping is my go-to tool. And the reason that I like the story mapping is it gives you a big visible representation of what the system should have by the end of it. And by seeing it all in there and being able to tell that story and have that discussion, you can come to some really quick potential trade-offs that you don't necessarily have to have it all in that first go, and you could do a release of it and then see if users are going to use it, or using the existing path, and even see if they want the features. And when I go to we were just recently working on a product where they wanted a print capability. And how often do we use, in the old days, how often do we use a print capability? But, the customer said, we need to be able to print this. So to give them the simplest version of that print functionality, we literally just gave them a dialog with print. Can't select any kind of printers. You can't add quality or like number of quantities. You can't change it to duplex. Just a simple, it's a dialog. It prints to whatever your default printer is. And, when we got back the click data on people accessing the print button, out of the 30,000 users that use the system or like sessions in that system, 150 of them actually used that print button. So we saved a significant amount of money not building out that feature. And we ended up eventually just scrapping it because there wasn't enough demand. So that's a story where we were able to kind of see that in the story map and then go, what's the simplest version of this can we do, and validate that people are going to use it, because we literally have, $50,000-$60,000 worth of work sitting here on the board.
So I think you sort of, I'll probably take us down a rabbit hole in a different direction, or maybe out of the back of the rabbit hole. I don't know if there is such a thing, but when we talk about code, it's interesting when you're working with development teams, and if you run this silly exercise where literally you give everyone a piece of paper and you tell them to draw you an S and make it in red, it's amazing the different interpretations you get of the type of S that they write. Some do this super elaborate Superman, some do this, really ornate design, and all you asked for was a simple S in red pen. So I think as developers being creative, they tend to want to make things more complex, to almost, I'll probably get flamed for this, but show off in a way, right? I'm really smart. I can write really intricate stuff. But if you keep the code simple and easy, it creates sort of that easier way to maintain, and you can get it out the door faster almost, to enable those, again, sort of what you were saying, James, we just want to do, this simple thing, just print, do this, do that, and then we can add on to it. So it's really keeping things simple and clean and maintainable, and then you can add on to it easier, quicker, and faster.
Right. So I'll chime in on that one too, because I think this definitely applies. When I see this principle, I'm thinking about MVPs. I'm thinking about story mapping. I'm thinking about, validating before spending a lot of money, that stuff. But I'm also thinking about, as Andrew's mentioning, the technical side of it. You guys familiar with the term YAGNI? I don't know if you know that one.
No, I don't.
That's a new one on me.
Right, so YAGNI stands for you aren't going to need it. And basically that's kind of a development mantra for when developers kind of put hooks in for future stories or future features when they're working on a particular story. So the idea of simple code, simple design. So if you look at Kent Beck's simple design rules, the first one is passes the tests, right? So all the tests must pass, reveals intention. So the code itself should reveal the intention without needing documentation, a lot of documentation, or without a lot of comments. No intentional duplication of code, and also fewest elements possible. So that fourth one of Kent Beck's simple design talks about this, right? We're going to do the smallest amount, and we're not going to put anything extra because you're most likely not going to need it anyway in the future, right? So that's kind of what this is talking about. So that YAGNI term is something I think is a kind of it's easy to remember mantra. You aren't going to need it.
So, what have you used? And I know, Troy, you've worked with a lot of development teams. What have you used to sort of instill with a whether it's one team or a few teams, to support developers going down that path, to enable them to sort of think smaller?
Well, I mean, one thing is splitting stories small as possible. That helps. Um, Also, test-driven development. I know, I've worked with a lot of teams who don't do it, but I've also worked with teams who do it, and the teams who do it, through that test-driven development cycle, that last part of that cycle is refactoring, right? So when you're refactoring, you're thinking about these four simple design rules, and that's how, so that you're always refactoring, so you're always making the code clean and simple, and that's the concept behind it. So one of the things I try to do is instill the importance of test-driven development and why it's important. And it's not, the tests are awesome, but it's more about the design. It's more about getting through the design through refactoring. And once, hopefully, they kind of get that, I have some workshops. I have actually one workshop I do is on YouTube, which is about mob programming in TDD. In that one, it was for non-developers, but the concepts are still there. Maybe we can link to it in the chat, but not in the chat, but in the show notes. Okay. Otherwise, I do talk about that and about productivity going down over time when you don't do these things because of technical debt, because of how difficult it is to make changes and code smells. So all of this is to kind of be able to be agile, right? To be able to change quickly. And without these types of practices, you're not going to be able to do it. In fact, I told a story on the last podcast about a team I work with who didn't do this, and they ended up having to rewrite a lot of stuff, a lot of wasted time and effort. So it's this principle number 10 is, in my opinion, extremely important. 9 and 10 kind of go hand in hand when you think about it on the technical side. If you're thinking about it on the story side or feature side, it applies to both. What do you think, James?
I mean, I absolutely 100% agree with you. I mean, I think one of the hardest things, though, to teach when teams are going over to Agile is the concept of throwing away code. So getting them to be able to embrace the concepts of refactoring. I can, it hands down, it's like, well, I'm just going to write something and then we're going to throw it away next sprint. Well, yeah, you are going to throw it away, but the stuff that's going to emerge out of it the next time is going to be better. So, I mean, that's been one of the biggest challenges working with teams, kind of getting them to understand some of the simplicity that we don't need to gold plate it. Every time you split a story doesn't mean that you can add in that extra little bit of widget every time you're refining it. It is about simplicity. It's not about gold plating. It's not about, you will throw away code and that's okay. You will rewrite big sections of code and that's all right. And, every developer that's ever come back with this argument, it's like, well, that's not as efficient. Like if I write it all first and think about these then things down the road, then, I'm going to be in a better spot. And so it is a total mindset shift. So I do kind of want to drag us back up out of the technical hole here, because I think as much as the product, as much as the development teams need to focus on this, I definitely see that there's a space for the product-minded folks to embody this too. And with the emergence of the lean startup, so 2010, Eric Ries. Sorry. He put out that book and started trying to change the dichotomy of how we build and test products. And in this software industry, there are a lot of interesting products that have spawned up out of small startups that quickly develop and move on to bigger and better things. Those unicorns. So, starting to bring back in a lot of Eric's concepts. Like, what are some techniques that you guys use to help people either do some level of prioritization? Are you using some types of templates like outcome? One of the things we did was shift to business outcomes. And I'll kind of go through that once I give you guys a chance to respond. But like, what kind of things can you give the product folks listening to this show tool wise that, could be very valuable to help them bring the simplicity to the teams?
So I don't know if it's a tool, but it's more of a layer of thinking, and maybe this is a non-agile thing to say, but the planning aspect of things, and the user journey, understanding the user journey and understanding what we need to build to support that. So I think understanding literally what the software is accomplishing, what problems we are trying to solve from a business perspective, can really lend itself to a much more focused sort of delivery or sprints or result. There's plenty of tools, templates. You just write it on a piece of paper, or write it on draw it out on a whiteboard. It doesn't have to be fancy. It's just a matter of a lot of the teams that I work with. I'll ask the business, or I'll challenge the business, and just ask that question, what problem are we trying to solve here? And I get a lot of blank stares. So I always find that to be an interesting exercise.
And there's something out there, kind of a big movement now called design thinking, if for those who aren't aware. So maybe that's something, I think that's kind of outside of the scope of this podcast. We could talk a lot about that, but I don't know. But basically, design thinking is something that's heavily regarded as, I'm not going to say the next big thing, because a lot of people are doing it already, but it's something that a lot of companies are doing. Also, I'll give a shout out to actually SAFe for this one. SAFe has these epic hypothesis statements, and I actually think that's a really cool thing. So it's the concept of, before something gets approved for budgeting, it has to be an epic, for instance. You have to prove out a hypothesis before you get the full budgeting. And I think that's a really cool thing. So if you just Google epic hypothesis statement SAFe, you'll find like a little template for it. And you basically have to just, show what the business outcome hypothesis is that you're going to meet in order for you to get like full funding. They have the same thing for features as well, but I think doing it at an epic level would be a big shift for a lot of companies who are just used to funding projects.
Well, I'm going to absolutely agree with you, Troy, because that's one of the practices that I promote. So I have a whole business outcomes canvas that I use with teams that go through a lot of the essential things of giving the team the context of what that problem statement is, and basically when it has measurable business outcomes in it. And the way the construct work is that business outcome actually becomes your epic, and all of the features and stories below that are working to achieve some level of that measurable business outcome. So that way, and what we ultimately do is figure out what that epic or that business outcomes template is going to roughly cost, and we give you about a quarter's worth of money. And you're going to go out and work through what you think those top features are, and come back and validate them as you go. And if we're not hitting the targets on those outcomes, then most likely we're not. This business outcome that you were thinking was either ill-conceived or not well thought through. And basically saying, okay, we're going to stop funding this, and you need to go back to the drawing board.
You talked about prioritization as well. A couple things I've done. I can give some tips. 2 different products that I worked on, we did a Kano analysis on. And I thought that worked really well for features and bigger stories. I don't know how well it would work for like big epics, but for features and big stories, I think it works pretty well. So if you're not familiar, maybe I can put a link in the show notes for that one. Another one is cost of delay. So there's a lot of work by, Don Wrightson's book, Principles of Product Flow, really gets into this, but cost of delay is a big one. It's a great one for prioritization, and there's kind of a modified version of that called Wait to Shortest Job First. So I'm just kind of throwing terms out there, but if you're home listening, you can Google if you're interested in these topics. Check them out.
Yeah, so it's just crazy how powerful a Kano exercise is. Being able to put down a short description of a potentially functionality or a feature that might be available to our users, and being able to get them to vote on what the exciters and delighters were. I mean, that was awesome. That was true feedback that came back and helped us really prioritize. Well, with the limited funds that we have, what can we build? So I can see how it adds a lot of value to even startups, all the way up to big, large enterprises.
And one of the things I remember about that exercise, James, is that there was a few things on that list that we thought, the users would really want, and they were like really low on the priority list when we actually did the Kano analysis. So that ended up saving us money that way too. So a really powerful tool called Kano analysis. If you want to look into it, basically it's a way to prioritize based on user feedback, and it's more scientific than just users want this thing or Moscow. There's some little scientific method to it created by Dr. Noriaki Kano. In fact, when I do a lot of trainings, product owner trainings, and I introduce this concept of Kano and we do an exercise, um, this is often the thing I get good feedback on the most at the end of the training is, oh, I like the Kano exercise. You usually see a lot of sticky notes on that. So this is definitely one that I recommend checking out.
So I have a question for you guys. Would you rewrite this principle any different?
Good question. I don't know.
So, sometimes it's one of the few places you see art, like the word art, would you still use that word? Is it still sort of relevant in today's, space, knowing that, this was written so many years ago? Would you change it if you could?
Yeah, personally, I do like the way it's written, although when you talk to people about it the first time they see it, they're not really sure what it means. I can say that because I've done a lot of trainings, and normally when we go over this, it like we understand it because we know a lot about the different techniques for doing this, but people that are new to it, I think I'm not sure how they're perceiving it because when I ask the question, what do you think that means? And they'll just kind of look at me a lot of times. So I'm not sure.
James,
But
any thought?
I definitely think that people get lost on art and maximizing the work not done. People definitely get completely lost on that, and it's a really eloquent way that they've kind of written this. Um, some of it, there is still art in simplifying, in simplicity and the work not done. But I think in 2001 to 2016, there is night and day ways to test things. There are a lot more ways to validate assumptions because we've had, 15, well, no, 16 years now to kind of grow and learn and have a lot of different thought process come in. I think it's very valuable. I still think that it still just holds, it's true. It holds the weight of what it was. I'd have a hard time rewriting this or wanting to rewrite it. I think that it becomes about how we teach it. And it's probably one of the big things that's wrong with the product owner role today and the way that it's trained or run at most organizations. This value is almost unachievable in most large corporations that I've been doing coaching at because of the simple fact that they're not ready to understand it. And that's why, it's probably more prevalent for smaller companies. But in my mind, this thing is beautifully simple. You just have to really dig into the meaning and want to actually understand what it is or have the right people teaching it.
Yeah, good point, Jim.
Yes. So literally, we're talking about sort of when we maximize the amount of work not done, we're sort of minimizing the waste, right? So literally, we're looking at, a product being fit for purpose in that sense. So, the simpler the product, the less there is to go wrong and sort of less technical debt incurred, if that makes sense. Not that I would rewrite it that way, but
Yeah,
I absolutely love my comment there, and I think it should be written.
Okay. So we are coming up on half an hour, guys. Is there anything else you wanted to call out when it comes to?
So keeping in the theme of the 12 days of Agile, 10 Lords of Leaping. How would you write this? And I'm stealing an Andy Cleffism here. How would you write this in regards to the simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential principle?
10 Lords sleeping. They're not doing anything.
Well, that's one way to maximize the work not being done. But yeah, I the couple other ones I've done, I haven't been able to be creative with that either. So
no, absolutely not. It's like 10 Lords validating test. No,
yeah,
doesn't work.
but maybe it's something we could pulse the audience to sort of chime in on, as well, as if they had a different way to write this principle, how would they write it? So, a challenge for our listeners to see how you guys and gals may rewrite this principle, or do you also believe it stands sort of on its own, even in today's current time?
Well, hey, thank you, Andrew and Troy, for your time. Thank you, listeners, for listening in, and check out tomorrow to hear those crazy 11 pipers piping. Till then, stay classy, San Diego.
On the 10th day of Christmas, my true love gave to me 10 lords a leaping,
9 ladies dancing,
8 men to milking, 7 swans swimming,
6 crazy geese,
5 golden rings,
4 calling birds,
3 French hens,
2 turtle doves,
and a partridge in a pear tree.